Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good day, all that good stuff. Thank you for tuning in. This is a marvelous, and you are witnessing another controversial video. Thank you for your time and attention because that's two things you can't get back. And I appreciate you for sacrificing that to listen to some information and some knowledge. With that, anytime you watch these videos, check the comment section because these are time stamped. Yes, I time stamped these for you. So therefore, if you don't have time to watch the whole video in one setting, or you want to get to a particular part in the video, or you just want to get to the point, I have time stamped the video because I know that your time is precious. And the last thing that I want to do is waste it. So check the comment section for the timestamp, and you can get right to where you need to be in a video. Of course, I'd love for you to watch the whole video, but I'm not delusional. And also subscribe. Subscribe. I hate to be that guy, but I am. So please subscribe to the channel. So with that, this one is a little light. I think it's light compared to the other stuff we talk about. And this is the NBA draft pushing feminism and prioritizing feminism over, should I say, not just feminism, but prioritizing marrying white women over fatherhood. So this is a unique topic that I put together. And this came about from me watching the NBA draft. Now, the reason why I decided to watch the NBA draft because one of the mothers of one of the draft picks went viral because of a dress that she had on, right? And I guess because she was older, cougar-like, and she had on this white dress, and I guess in the media she was looking smashing and all that. I was like, well, why is this a big deal, right? So as I'm looking at the different picks, I also notice, I'm like, wow, there seems to be an abundance of white women in the draft picks tables. So I was like, let me watch this whole draft so I can see what's going on with that. So that's what sparked me to do this video. So first, this is going to be two parts within this video. One, we're going to address the feminism that I noticed watching the draft. Then we're going to address the overwhelming amount of Caucasian wives that's prominent in the NBA, which is something that's it's not news, but it just seems like it's an epidemic, and it's making me wonder if this is something that's woven into the culture of the NBA to the point to where it has to be that way, meaning that you pretty much won't have an NBA unless you have the presence of white wives. I'm really starting to think that that's something that has to be in the NBA, and we're going to get into that. So the first part, I'm watching the draft, and as I'm watching the draft, of course, this is a milestone draft because this is the first time that a woman has hosted the NBA draft. Yay! Gotta give props to that and all that, right? Cool. Doesn't matter to me because all I care about is I want to see the NBA draft. So as I'm watching the draft, I notice that there's an overemphasis on mothers in the draft. Now, I love it. That's great because we all understand the relationship that a child has with their mother. That's a priceless bond. So I get that. And I even understand that when you're dealing with the perception of black men, there's a myth that the fathers aren't present. So in society, I would expect these myths and stereotypes and perceptions to carry out on my TV screen, especially when it comes to sports, which is dominated by black men. What struck me as peculiar was that the draft didn't just have mothers present. There were also fathers present. So the red flag started to come when there's three hosts, two males and one lady, right? Now, the lady host, her name is Malika Andrews. I think she's pretty and all that stuff. Congratulations to her on this milestone. As I'm watching this, though, and the draft picks are announced, and they come up on stage and they shake the commissioner's hand and all that, I notice that Malika Andrews, the female host, she kept emphasizing the mothers, right? So it was one particular instance where the mother who was in the WNBA, I noticed that's a trend too. I'm gonna do a video on that next. And she kept saying, let's just look at this moment. It's because of the work that the mother did with her son. That's why he's here. And the reason why this was strange is because I seen the draft pick hug the father and the mother equally, right? And I noticed this throughout the draft. But it seems that each time a draft pick came, the lady host, Malika Andrews, just kept emphasizing the mother. We have to look at this precious moment between mother and son, mother and son. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe these gentlemen don't have fathers there. Maybe these father figures or stepfathers or brothers or just someone other than the father. So I take it upon myself to look up each of these draft picks, and lo and behold, it is their fathers that's present. But each time that these draft picks are announced, this lady commentator, Malika Andrews, is only emphasizing the relationship between the mother and the son, to the point to where they're saying, let's just freeze that, the mother and the son hugging. Now, one time did I hear her say the parents who were both present, or father and mother, or father. It was just the mother. And this was overemphasized because the mother, in this case, this point, I mean, there's plenty of examples, but this one particular example, the mother was in the WNBA, and I guess she felt that that was super special because the mother's in the WNBA and the son is there, and they have pictures together, and it shows them working together and all of that. And she goes, this is just a precious moment. And then they span, and then they show, you know, the pictures of the mother and the son and all of this stuff from childhood until, you know, college, and then now until the draft. And then I noticed in all of these flashback photos, there's no picture of of son and father. No picture of father and son. Now, this is weird to me because typically in the NBA, you have fathers that are NBA players, right? And they have the special bond with their son, and they're a big reason why the son is in the NBA. Even with that, when you see things like the draft and when you see games, they still emphasize the mother, right? The draft, the players will say, thank you, mom. If the mom is in the audience, the commentators will shout out the moms of the player. On draft day, even before this draft, when it was all men hosting, it would still be emphasis on the mother and the father. This particular draft that took place last week, no emphasis on the father. So my red flags automatically go off. I'm like, yo, what is this? So I'm like, okay, maybe this is a one-off. So as this keeps happening, now I'm like, yeah, this is a clear agenda. Lo and behold, the lady host, Malika Andrews, she mentions this is just a special occasion watching these mothers put in so much work. And it's very special, and I just want to emphasize it and go back to that moment, the same moment that already passed. She wants to go back to the moment of this mother and the WNBA player with her son, and then she says, which confirms the red flag and the propaganda, this is so special because, you know, of all the accomplishments that women made, and then Title IX. I'm like, okay, there we go, right? So this is a clear, to me, clear agenda. And it just so happens to be during a week that this Roe versus Wade situation happened. Now, some might say, there you go again, Amon, you reaching, who cares? Okay, The reason why it's a big deal, and I might be reaching, but this happened. This is a big deal because when you see something like this go down, this is a deliberate attempt. And this right here is an attempt that speaks to the relationship that women have, especially black women, have with men in 2022. To the point to where you're so blatant to discount the father, who are also NBA players, right? Who are present, that it almost shows a dysfunction or some kind of hate or dislike for the man, especially black men, that black women have towards black men. And it played out in the NBA draft in front of all to see. That's dangerous, okay? Because if it's played out like that in a public setting, then it's going to send a message that this is something that's regular and that it's okay to not give both parents credit and to slowly fade out and discount the fathers, okay? Now let's put that in this corner. Let's get to part 2 of this and then put it together. The second part, I noticed that there was an overwhelming amount of white wives, not with the draft players, but with the fathers. So this made me realize or question what's going on in the NBA to the point to where you have all of these black men, a lot of them who play professional ball, deal with white women. Is it something in the NBA which is like in the energy and soul of the NBA in which you have to get a white wife? Now again, I always say love is colorblind. To each his own. The heart likes what it likes. That's my motto. That's my father's motto. That's what it is. I don't knock nobody who's in love, regardless of the ethnicity or race. Cool. The reason why it's an issue is because you don't see it the other way around, right? You don't see this push pretty much anywhere else. If you look at other sports that don't have an overwhelming amount of black men, you don't see this. So the question becomes, what is it about the NBA that's in its soul that it almost has to be that a black man deals with a white woman? All right? That's something that's very telling, which struck me as odd. So I wanted to make this video just to question those two things. And there was even a draft pick in which the father was Italian, right? And this is why I say it's an attack on fatherhood, even outside of race, because there was one draft player whose father was Italian and whose mother was black, right? Who was also, I believe, a professional ball player. She was. But there was no mention of the father. The father didn't even come on the couch to talk. But I'm pretty sure the father was present. And the father wasn't mentioned. But the mother was mentioned left and right. So during this draft, you have an example in which you got white fathers, black fathers, and these fathers were not mentioned by the commentators, especially the lady commentator Malika Andrews, which was strange to me because you don't see this. Any other time you watch the draft, any other time you watch the NBA, you see if parents are present, they mention both parents. They don't just single out one. The fact that they singled out one, which is the woman, during Pride Month, during a week of this Roe versus Wade, is suspicious. Now, where am I getting at? I'm saying that feminism, along with homosexuality, along with a bunch of other things, have to be pushed because there's a war on men and there's an attack of fatherhood. And in propping up women excessively and phasing out the men, you have a situation where you create a culture in a society that is less inclined to fight back to injustice. Because anytime you have a patriarchy on a decline, civilization crumbles. So this isn't me just saying, oh, women shouldn't get props. I'm not saying that. I'm saying everything should be put in context. And when you're talking about the NBA draft, first of all, I shouldn't even be seeing this when I'm watching the NBA draft because this is the NBA draft. This isn't Fox News, or this isn't, a press conference talking about all of these topics, right? So the fact that they mentioned Title IX, you could look up Title IX and see what that is. And the fact that they kept emphasizing women's rights during this program shows that there's a concerted effort to push feminism. And the fact that this happened during Roe versus Wade, I don't think is an accident. And the fact that they had her as the first during this week also isn't an accident during Pride Month. Because all of these things are planned out in advance anyway. So when you're watching these things, you have to be very, very careful about the subtleties that's played on your conscious and your subconscious. Because if not, these things will fly right by you and we'll think it's okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. So I just wanted to point that out, and I wanted to also raise the question, what's going on in the NBA where it's almost a must that a good percentage of black men deal with white wives, deal with white women? That boggles me. And if you look at the draft, this is the sole reason why I looked at the draft, because it just kept popping up. And I'm like, anytime you see something that keeps popping up, it's a pattern. It's something that's there that's causing that. So what is causing that? What is the link between the NBA and the proclivity for black men to deal with white women and then have offspring that are mixed and interracial? Now, I don't know what that's about, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Now, there's a good book. Let me pull up the book that I read that kind of touched on this. I'm gonna pull it up. Please pardon the pause. Yeah, this is a book that actually touches on that. It's called Young Black Rich and Famous. Young Black Rich and Famous. This is a good book. Now, in this book, it shows how it basically shows the parallel between hip hop and the NBA. So during the 80s and 90s, the rise of the NBA paralleled the rise of hip hop, and a lot of the 90s stars, they were an archetype for hip hop as well as the NBA. And that book was saying that because hip hop culture is dealing with hyper masculinity, right? In the NBA, this played out in attitude, and this played out in the style of dress. And that's why you have players like Michael Jordan was the first one to wear his shorts baggy, right? He changed the trend because normally they were like booty shorts in the NBA. So Michael Jordan came along, they were baggy. And then that's in the 80s, right? And then the Jordans became popular. And then in the 90s, you had players like Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson was unapologetically himself, right? Came from the streets, came from poverty, broken home, street background and all that, had the cornrows, and his style of dress was extremely hip hop. But then the book was comparing players like Grant Hill, right? And Allen Iverson played for Georgetown. Grant Hill, on the other hand, was someone that played for Duke University. Duke was known to be very kind of prestigious, straight arrow, by the book, and Grant Hill was kind of preppy. So it was saying that the athletes in the NBA that mirrored hip hop, they always got backlash for being street, and they got targeted more as opposed to players like Grant Hill, who was seen as good players with good images and not rebellious, and they were more accepted, right? So the book was saying that this kind of dichotomy is something that played out in the NBA to the point to where the players that were not like Grant Hill but were more like Allen Iverson were more attacked by fans for not being amiable, and that rebelliousness was something that wasn't tolerated by the NBA. And one of the things that changed because of this hip hop presence and persona in 90s NBA athletes, there was a change in dress codes in which you had demanded you had to wear suits. So David Stern implemented a policy to kind of clean up the NBA from this extremely black, extremely aggressive street kind of persona in the NBA and polish it up to where it was a good image. And that's a kind of attack in a sense, and that's a kind of breaking of attitude when it comes to black men and when it comes to hip hop, and that permeated in the NBA. And players like Grant Hill were more accepted because they didn't have that edge, and that's what the NBA wants. They want players that don't have that edge, but they want players that's going to be agreeable. So I recommend that book. Now, saying all that, that might lead to why um, there's a proclivity for white women, because having a white woman automatically takes you away from that edge, that street, and it's the farthest thing from where most of these players come from, which is the hood. So possibly in the fabric of breaking these NBA players to be good, less edgy ball players, it could be in the soul of the NBA to deal with white women as a way to curb the edge and curb the aggressiveness that are attached to black men being children of hip hop. So that's just food for thought. What was odd is that it was the parents who are baby boomer parents, right? These were parents that are in their like 50s and 60s at this draft. And then you had these men who were already ball players. So maybe this breaking down of the edge and aggressiveness in black men is something that started generations ago, and it just passed down. So maybe it's something that has to happen to where if you didn't have it and you didn't have these black men deal with these white women, maybe the NBA would be too uncontrollable. Maybe the rebelliousness and the edge would be so much that the commissioner and the team owners couldn't handle it. Because at one point, some of these owners didn't even like interracial marriages. They didn't even want these black men dealing with these white women like that, right? However, maybe it's something stronger and deeper going on to the point to where A, they can't control it, and then B, once you get into that lifestyle of making money and fame, which the book touches on, maybe it's no longer a thing of race, but a thing of class. So there's a difference between classism and racism. So when you get to a certain point in the NBA, you become far removed from where you came from, which is the inner city, and then you become entrenched in a world that you're not familiar with, which is wealth, prominence, and more Caucasian people. So therefore, you're now in a different class. So even if you're somebody that might have your black identity intact, you're still going to be a stranger because you have money. And when you have money, that changes your mindset and your outlook. So now you might want to keep it real, but you can't because you're in a different tax bracket and your mindset is different. And therefore, you just can't be around people that you used to because the habits are different. You've outgrown them because your exposure is more. And once your exposure is more, you can't do the same things that you used to do, and that alienates you from the society of which you came and grew up. So maybe, just maybe, it's an inevitable thing that has to take place in the NBA in order to keep black men controlled. So that's just food for thought. Now, there are some black men in the NBA that have black wives. Um, I don't know how much. I think it's a small percentage. But maybe that's just something that only a few can obtain. And maybe there's a correlation with these black men that have these black wives and their level of rebellion and outspokenness. So maybe these are things to look at. But I just wanted to make this video because the draft day kind of irked me, all of this propaganda. And if you look at the draft, you'll see what I'm saying. This lady, host Malika Andrews, throughout the whole program, is just praising the mothers, even though the fathers are right there, and Father's Day just passed, and no mention of the fathers, none of that. So that's suspect, because you don't see that the other way around. So with that, thank you for tuning in. I'm going to do a follow-up to this. Is the NBA a breeding ground, just like politics, to create people of prominence way ahead of time? But I'll get more into that in the next video. So thank you again. Don't forget, the video is time-stamped. Appreciate your time and attention. Subscribe, and I appreciate you. Peace.